I can biohack myself where I can time a beat drop and get an adrenaline kick during a 2K. Um, so I will always put like if I have aux for a 2K test, I can time a song that I know literally sends shivers down my spine when the beat drops at 800 to go. And so then all of a sudden I have 150 free meters where I don't feel any pain.
What's up, everyone? So I have Justin Best here, who is a 2020 Tokyo Olympian who represented the men's 8, I believe, right? And then he is now currently in the midst of training and preparing for his next Olympic cycle. And I know Justin from my time at St. Joe's. I actually rode and coached his brother for a period of time, who I believe they're about a year apart. And I'll let him kind of tell that story a little bit. But I've known Justin for a while in terms of just around the rowing circles and kind of getting to understand or hearing a lot about him. He actually rowed at Drexel University. So I'm going to actually ask him why Drexel, because I'm curious. When his brother went to St. Joe's, he could have very well came and joined us over, or upriver a couple miles. But anyway, Justin, without further ado, why don't we kick things off to you? I want you to just kind of start with your introduction and tell me and tell everyone else listening what you're getting ready for Tokyo, for Paris now. You're getting ready for Paris. You're a couple months out. And I think in terms of just the selection process and getting geared up for things, you're down in Sarasota. But why don't we run with that? Why don't you give a little brief introduction and give us the state of where things are in the Olympic selection process as you go for round 2, here in Paris in a few months. Why don't you start there?
For sure. Well, thank you, Kevin, for having me on the At 1000 podcast. I've seen a couple of clips that you've put together, and you asked some great rowing related questions. I myself am a self-professed rowing nerd, so love to dive into conversations about the sport and everything around that. Kevin touched on kind of my background recently, but I went to a public school called Unionville High School. It's in southern Chester County, Pennsylvania, so about 40 minutes outside of like the Boathouse Row area, if there's no traffic. We actually rode on the Christina River down in Delaware, so actually the exact body of water that University of Delaware men's team and women's team practice on. They would practice early in the morning. We would practice in the afternoon, so we wouldn't overlap necessarily. I did that 4 years in high school, and then was fortunate enough to be recruited to row. And so ended up going for, the Drexel Dragons, a little ways up the river from St. Joe's. Obviously, my brother went to St. Joe's, and I think it was the class of 2018, if I recall. Yeah, 2018. So, I in the process, he was a freshman when I was, looking at the recruiting cycle, and I looked at St. Joe's. I did. No, it was Erwin and I had some great conversations. But I guess like a brief into why Drexel, they are in a position where they can offer athletic scholarships, which I think is very unique in the sport of men's rowing, especially outside of the Washington and Cal. For me at the time, my mindset as a 17-year-old high schooler was, I'm not sure if I wanted to go all the way over to the West Coast to row. Whereas I have this opportunity to go compete for a school, and then also have not really need to worry about tuition and other things like associated with college cost, right in my backyard. So like I said, 40-minute drive. You felt like you could get away from home, but also you weren't too far from home. So for me, it kind of made the most sense in that case. But I, a little bit back into high school, I rowed for the under-19 national team. And then I kind of got the, high performance bug at that point. I kind of knew for myself, I want to do this at the highest level to see where I can push myself. I have a quote in my senior yearbook where it's like, where do you see yourself in 10 years? And said, potentially training for the 2028 LA Olympics. So I called my shot. So, but continued to go for the national team throughout my college career. My freshman year was not on pace to make the U23 team. Similar story with my sophomore year, but my junior year rolled around and had the opportunity to try out for the under 23 national team. Was able to make the 8. We went over and won a world championships that summer. I did it again in 2019 where we took silver. And that entire experience kind of reaffirmed, like, the national team is something that I want to continue to pursue even post college. And with that, I graduated slightly early than my design program and moved to the Oakland area in January of 2020. That's where the U.S. Men's Training Center was at the time, helmed by Mike Tatey. Philly storied legend. I was fortunate enough to go through an entire selection process. COVID obviously delayed the games by a year, so it was the 2020 Olympics being held in 2021, and was able to make the team. I was 2 seat in the men's 8. And then from there, I've been on now 2 World Championships teams in 2022 and 2023, capped most recently by a silver medal in the men's 4. We had a pretty great summer of racing in 2023, and it was really encouraging to see that the work that we put in was paying off. Now it's kind of back to going through the selection process officially again. And we're down in Florida right now. I think technically today is the start of the Olympic selection camp. So the way that's going to look is the men's 8, unfortunately, didn't qualify for this last year's World Championships. So our chief high performance officer, Josie Verdankschat, has decided to select the men's 4 extremely early relative to the men's 8, so that the men's 8 has a sufficient time to go through official selection, make sure everyone's in the right seat, and then, in hopes to go to the final Olympic qualifiers in Lucerne, Switzerland a little later this spring to qualify the men's 8 for the Olympics. So for me, I'm going to be seat racing again for the men's 4. And that'll happen actually in the next few days. We're going to be doing some time trials in different combinations. So those were predicated by performance at the winter speed order, which just happened 2 weeks ago. So my para partner and I, who were in the men's 4 last summer, we unfortunately placed 3rd. We would have liked to place 2nd, but it was really, really good racing throughout the weekend, and it shows that the team and the level of competition has progressed. So we'll have to do a few seat races, a few time trials to kind of determine and lock in, what that men's 4 lineup is going to look like. I'm fortunately in that position to be able to do that. And then from there, those who don't filter into the 8 selection, and the 8 will be selected. So that's going to happen over the next 3 weeks cumulatively. But the men's 4 selection will be kind of wrapped up in the next, 3-4 days here. So that's just a general background and kind of like what I'm doing right now. So hopefully that's concise and you can kind of clip that as needed, but
yeah. And that's, and I'm always curious, and I'm sure in the selection process, you have the 8, you have the 4, so on and so forth. Is there a priority? Is there a hierarchy in terms of boats? Is there is it based off the skill sets and the athletes or the given Olympic cycle? Because obviously you're going around, you're doing this for a second time, and with Tokyo and now Paris. But dive into that a little bit, the how the boats are selected, just in terms of the boat itself.
So the boats are selected, and it kind of starts at the top. The entire goal of the U.S. Olympic Committee is to pull home as many medals as possible. They prefer gold, then they prefer silver, and then obviously bronze is 3rd. But at the end of the day, they want as many medals as possible. So the orders come from the top. The USOC wants to put medals on Americans. Now, the way that they view medals is a boat class is a medal. So even though it takes 9 people to get a medal in an 8, they still only see that as 1 medal, just based on the events. And so our chief high performance officer, Josie Verdankschat, when he got hired in late 2021, early 2022 is kind of when he took the reins. He wanted to prioritize rowing smaller boats because in that event, you can create more medal opportunities because you're distributing your athletes across boat classes where you don't need as resource heavy. So he prioritized the pair in 2022, kind of looked at the talent pool, at least on the men's side, and then decided to prioritize the men's 4 for a sweep in 2023. Fortunately, we were able to get a medal and kind of be the proof point of, what could happen if you choose to prioritize and, not necessarily put all the eggs in the 8. And he's going to continue that priority through the Paris Olympics. The way he sees it is he has a medal or a medal-worthy performance in the 4, so he wants to continue that. And it would just be very nice if we could you follow that up with a medal performance in the 8. That's kind of where the logic came with this, priority stacking. I would say from the 4, then the 8 is the second priority boat on the men's sweep side, and then lastly is the men's pair. Just the way that the dynamic of the men's pair is shaking out, there's a lot of really strong countries in the men's pair. Specifically noted, the Sinkovic brothers decided to forego the double because they think that they have a better shot in Olympic gold in the pair compared to the double, because the Dutch are just extremely dominant. But it's a strategy game of, okay, well, if this country and that country are putting their priority into, X boat class, why would I, waste my resources and my best talent when I could compete in another boat class and have a higher opportunity of a medal chance? And he kind of did that arithmetic based on last year's Worlds, based on, what's going on in the rumor mill of the international rowing community. And I think he's trying to play that strategic chess with the thought in mind that we do qualify the men's 8.
Okay. And with and then for you personally, like, are you feeling like this is your second time around, right? So you had Tokyo, and given, kind of just you already articulated, a little bit about your path to get there, and we're going to dive into that here coming up because I want to talk about even Tokyo. But do you feel, with this being your second time around, do you feel in like a different, kind of just mental state and confidence with how you're going about the day to day and the grueling training that you're going to be doing? And it's probably only going to get even more kind of competitive and intense as you kind of get rolling here. But do you feel like you're in a different state heading into your second cycle versus, Tokyo with everything else that also obviously came with Tokyo, the Tokyo Olympics as well? But where are you in terms of just the state, mentally and physically, and as you kind of going down this second journey?
I think the second time around, I'm in a much more confident, and I feel much more prepared. And not to say I didn't feel prepared in Tokyo, but Tokyo to me was kind of this long shot of even making it. And then getting named to the crew, we were putting up really solid times. I think we had a medal shot, and we were 1 second off of a medal. This time around, I know the guys that we have in the system. I know the competition that is out there. I feel much more confident at a medal. And now in my mindset, it's not just, oh, do I make the team? Oh, can we scratch a medal? It's, I have eyes set on gold. And I think that's kind of the expectation of at least the guys that are going for the straight 4 is, we placed silver and we were X amount of seconds off. That's kind of where we're going to hold ourselves to is the gold medal standard. So to me personally, I feel mentally more prepared. I feel wiser to the process. I feel like knowing what the outcome is going to be of all of the hard training. Sometimes it is kind of difficult if you haven't been there before. You're in these weeks of, continuous 6 days a week, 2 to 3 times a day. Sometimes not having that experience of knowing like what's on the other end, it kind of crushes you mentally. But for me, knowing I'm in the dog days, I know now what I'm going to feel like coming out of it. And when you hit that taper, you kind of feel like a superhero. Just like going out and just being able to hold splits that you just felt like were impossible before. So I have that knowledge as well. And then also physically, I feel like I'm at my peak. And I know that for a fact because we do a lot of physiology testing. Most recently, I went 5:47 on a 2K. So I have that proof point as well. And I feel like I've been rowing better and better, each year. The air at the top of the mountain gets pretty thin, I will say. So you're seeing those like very small marginal gains in terms of your rowing technique. And all of a sudden the cost of getting slight technical changes is hundreds of thousands of more meters than it used to be. But, you have to keep that approach knowing that you are always like hoping for the perfect imperfection stroke. Because there's no perfect stroke. It's always like striving for that. And then knowing all of those things and kind of having that like mentality is what I'm trying to, continue to push as I go into the selection process again. And then assuming all goes well, fingers crossed, taking that all the way through training until Paris.
Gotcha. That's no, that's awesome. And just to kind of have that clarity and just that, where it's like, okay, like I've been here before. I know what I've done it before. I've seen this before. And it's impressive just kind of, hearing it from you where it's like, you kind of know, like, what's to come, because obviously it's the second go around. And
it doesn't make it any less hard. I will say, like, the training is still extremely hard. The expectations and the momentum and the hype that you have to like hold yourself to. It's not easy, but I mean, it's like going into a haunted house and you kind of know where the jump scares are going to be. It doesn't make them that much less scary, but like at least you're prepared for it, right?
Yeah. And I want to take it back to your start with rowing. Yep. And so my first time kind of getting, hearing about you was, I think it was Center City Slam, back in like 20, I think you were a freshman at Drexel. It might've been, I think I was a volunteer assistant coach for a high school program. I just graduated. And I think we were at Center City Slam as well. And someone was like, oh, like, that's Garen's brother. And, I was like, oh, this guy's, I could tell at that time, I was like, oh, this guy, I think he went probably like 6'16" or something like that. Is that maybe something like that,
14,
right?
14, somewhere in there.
Mid-teens. I was like, okay, this guy, this is, and obviously, knowing your brother, like your brother had a pretty awesome standout career himself at St. Joe's. He's, he's obviously, you guys kind of probably growing up together. There's probably a sense of competitiveness and
for sure,
but also guiding each other. And I'm curious if we take it back to pre-Drexel, pre-Center City Slam, all that. I know Unionville High School, so I didn't row in high school. I started rowing when I got to college, but I know Unionville from my times at Great Valley High School up in Malvern playing football and wrestling. I knew nothing about their rowing program.
Right.
And if it even existed when, I'm a couple years older than you, if it even existed at the time. But who were you in high school? Like when did you land on rowing? Yep. When did you kind of figure out that, okay, in your yearbook, writing that where LA 2028, how did that start to materialize at high school, particularly at Unionville, which credit to them as a pretty successful club now, but, probably not, it's just probably a little bit of an unknown with, previous Olympians. So shed a little light on when that kind of started to turn in your mind where, okay, rowing is going to be a piece of my life and I want to take this to the highest of the highs. And that sounded like that was part of your mindset at an early age. Shed a little light on that.
It like early relative to some other like rowers, I would say. But so I guess I was in between sports, between my summer of 8th grade and going into freshman year. And so I tell this story all the time as to how I got into rowing, because my parents they went to one regatta kind of as spectators when they were like, started dating like many years ago. So they generally had an idea of this sport, but they had never been in a boat, didn't really know anyone that did it. So they had no idea. They watched The Social Network. And the Winklevoss twins prominently featured. Armie Hammer portrayed actually both of them, and they CGI'd, his face onto both of them. And on a whim, it was a good movie. They enjoyed it, but they were like, oh, like they have like an upper body build, and they have a similar stature to Justin. He's in between sports. Let's Google some rowing clubs in the area. And like you said, in that part of Pennsylvania, there's not really many rowing clubs, or schools don't really have rowing. It's like if you're not on Boathouse Rows, rowing doesn't really exist in that region. So they found a club in northern Delaware called Newport Rowing Club, signed up for a summer learn to row camp. And I was hooked because all of a sudden I got to go outside of like my little bubble, I would call it. And then I got to go on the water. I got to interact with new people and learn this whole new thing. My freshman year into my sophomore year, even like my first 2K was like 8:07 or somewhere in there. So I was gassed when I finished that. Like, but there was just something about getting off of the erg, and then seeing kind of like these results week in and week out kind of keep compounding, that got me kind of really hooked on the prospect of rowing. Now, in terms of like the national team and like that level, there was a guy, he was a couple classes ahead of me at Unionville. He had rowed for the club in Northern Delaware. His name's Nathan Smith. He went on to the junior team 2013 or 2012, and he got to go to Trakai, Lithuania. He got to travel all over the place and go to these selection camps and all of these really cool experiences. He went to youth nationals, and I'm actually pretty fortunate that I was just like a few years behind him and got to get, like, witness a path going forward, because I'm not sure like I would have had that exposure from that small club to begin with. So he kind of like blazed the trail in terms of like, okay, this is what the U19 national team looks like. And I kind of was like, okay, what did he do to get to that point? I saw those incremental improvements and kind of started setting goals for myself to do more than what just like my high school training plan was. Was able to start seeing successes on the erg and go in and out of relatively competitive times, and then was able to be in some fours that were, because that's all we could compete in really. Coming from this small club, was fours in the region. Our big regional championships was Mid-Atlantics. So we'd race against Mercer Juniors, Lawrenceville, trying to think, Mountain Lakes, like clubs of that area. So like that was kind of like the big championships. And I was actually ended up in a lightweight 4 that qualified for youth nats through that, which was really cool. So we got to go down to Tennessee when I was a sophomore. And then going from my sophomore year to junior year, there was a group of kids who went to Unionville rowing for this club. And we're like, well, we have enough kids. Like, why don't we just like found this rowing club for Unionville? We could race at Stoats, which was actually a really big pull, then lead up to city championships. So I think we had like 30 kids that were rowing for this club, and we're like, okay, let's go to our board and kind of pitch, rowing. And I thought that was a really cool experience. And they kind of had that same idea that you were just talking about. They're like, what is this rowing thing? Like none of these other schools, like, I've heard, like Conestoga has a rowing team, and they're not even in like our, competition, conference, but we pitched it, and you're like, okay, we'll help where we can. And we founded the Unionville High School rowing team, going on celebrating 10 years this year, which is unbelievable to think about. So did that in 2014, rowed for, Unionville, and then was fortunate enough to get invited to the U19 selection camp, Pittsburgh, 3 weeks, and was named to the 8. And I think for me, the final like nail, or like the final step in terms of like, I want to do this at the highest level, was in 2015 for the U19 World Championships. It was hosted in Rio de Janeiro. Every time they do an Olympics, the previous year, the junior team or the U19 team is kind of the guinea pig of the test, or of the facilities. So they had us go down there. They had us go through the credential process. They had us like kind of go through what a Olympic athlete would go through the following summer. So for them, they get to test out and see like, okay, are there kinks in the process? Where did we fail? What was good about the venue? For us, it was just really cool because you got to see all the Olympic rings all over the place. And I remember sitting at the start line of my final for the 2015 Junior Worlds, and I look up and I'm seeing like literally Christ, like Christ the Redeemer, just like up on this mountain. And I'm looking around and I'm like, okay, that guy's speaking Russian, that guy's speaking German, and I get to do my sport. Like, there's only so many words to kind of experience, like to explain that experience. And I was like, yeah, this is it. This is what I want to do. I really want to do this and do it at the highest level, which was the Olympics. So kind of having that experience, knowing what Nate went through to kind of get to that point, that's where I kind of was like, yeah, this is what I'm going to do. And, I'm going to do everything in my power to kind of get my path towards that direction. Got recruited to Drexel, rode for, like I said, those 4 years, and just kept blazing the trail. And I was fortunate enough to kind of end up on the right side of things as I left college.
And in high school, so at Unionville, and with rowing in these clubs, So I'm curious, two parts here. You said that you were in transition from, and as we circle back around to like, okay, like the mission of, this show in many ways, it's like to provide athletes who are kind of going through this process or just, rowing in high school and giving them the tools and the skill and the knowledge that, things that people who are training at the highest of the highs can, there might be one or two things that these athletes can take away from your experience,
Yep.
to guide them to whatever the landing spot is, right? Just, whether it's to go to college, to compete at a high level, so on and so
Yep.
forth. But for you at Unionville, I'm curious on two parts, right? You said you're in transition from another sport, and then you landed on rowing, right? Or your parents researched, rowing clubs and you landed on rowing. And I'm curious what those sports were, what kind of athlete you were, at your core, and then
Yep.
finding rowing. Um, and then also there's a space from when you said, okay, like I started rowing, I'm at Unionville, and now I'm on the junior national team. I got selected on junior national team. I'm curious, was that something that was reliant purely on the training that you were doing with your club? Was it, or were you also like, okay, like I have this goal and I'm also doing some other stuff on the side. I'm maybe, there's probably a place for the erg in my training.
Yep.
Like there has to be something that, kind of pushed you in that direction where now it's like, okay, like now I'm in Rio, with all these people around me and this is
Yep.
pretty awesome. Like tell me a little bit
Yep.
about that. Like, describe that, those high school days for me.
Sure. I think the first part to your question, I had played football and I was like fully in on football. And that was from elementary school. I played flag football because, where I was, you weren't allowed to play tackle football until you were like 13 or something. So I played flag football. Once I was able to, I played tackle football. I played tackle football for a small like peewee club and then did it for my middle school. And there was one game in particular, and it was weird. I wasn't the biggest kid, but I was like sizable enough. So I was like one of our starting left tackles. And so I was like up in the O line, in the trench every single play, um, where you just kind of need to learn to tell your body to say, like, I don't care if you're in pain, you just got to push, you got to get your job done. But there was one time we did a heavy side pull. So I came over and the guy that I thought I was supposed to block pulled back. And so I wasn't paying attention. And I just like, one thing I remember is all of a sudden there's someone's helmet like right in front of me. So I guess like one of their safeties had pulled around for a blitz. And all of a sudden I wasn't paying attention because the guy I thought it was blocking was like far enough away. And I don't really remember getting out of the pile and then like I was back at the huddle and I'm like, okay, what is happening? So I ended up getting a concussion from that. And that I was like, okay, I don't want to play football anymore. Because all of a sudden light hurt and like you just wanted to just like be a zombie all day. So I looked for other sports where I could just, continue to get activity done and, get exercise and get my energy out. Did track and field and I did cross country running too. So I dabbled in a few other different spots, but like that's kind of where I ended up, where I was just, running. And that's where I found my way into the sport. Now, what I would say is I always tried to do everything the coach told me, because what I always found was like, if the coach said, do this, you get more playtime, or, like inevitably you get better at what you're trying to do. And I kind of learned that pretty early on in athletics, where it's like, if the coach is saying jump, just be like, okay, how high? So I'd say like that translated very well to rowing, where like the coachability, because it's one of those sports where not many people are just innately like good at it, because it is such a foreign concept to like, some people can have really great physical like engines, but the stroke itself it's very unnatural. And I'd say you have to be in some capacity athletic to kind of get what I view the most important part of the stroke is, the catch, correctly. So you have a lot of people who are not super athletic that can never grasp like how to get their blade to the water effectively. That's the most athletic. I would like kind of akin it to a single hand dunk. Like you have to be in some capacity athletic to get that correct. Um, but like I said, the coachability kind of allowed me to, go through, the novice years. And I was in our second novice boat actually to my brother. So we joined our novice team kind of roughly at the same time. And he was in our first novice eight and I was in our second novice eight. And I was like, dang it, my brother, like, I know he's older than me, but like, I want to be in that boat, blah, blah, blah. So a little bit of competitive edge to kind of like get things started. And then like, I wasn't the strongest kid out the bat, but I knew if I put in the work and put in the time, like I was going to get the result eventually and yield it. But then I guess the second part of your question was knowing like what I needed to do was develop the physiology, which I had to, work extremely hard to do. It seemed like to me, breaking 7 minutes on a 2K took so long. Just having to, go for those, like we would do a couple of 2K tests throughout the spring. And I just remember like getting 701, 7 flat, 702. And it was just this, I need to rip this. And so then I would, do extra steady state and, as my, my like horizon of the sport grew, realized I could do more and I could do more smartly. That's where I kind of was looking into the benefits of getting a heart rate monitor, because I was one of those kids where I was like, all right, I'm just going to go out and pin it every single day, get my heart rate to max. And I felt like I wasn't getting much improvement. Whereas then I started looking, if you just do a little bit more at a little bit less intensity, you seem to get some more benefits. And I'm not saying like go against what your coach has you doing, but like there are ways to supplement kind of the work that you need to get done. And then I guess like throughout high school, refining and tweaking things that I felt worked for me compared to the literature. And when I say the literature, I mean like I read 2 rowing books, and then there was like the Concept 2 Erg Forum, and then Rowing Reddit, and then so I was like kind of looking around and seeing like what are these resources that I could look to try and get better at what I was doing. And then one final thing I always did was I watched so much racing video on World Rowing, just heats and semis if they had them, of like the best guys. And then I would kind of like take like the little cursor and slow down the video of the guys that were winning and being like, okay, well, where's their hand on the oar? Or, like what's their body look like as they come into the catch? And, there's a lot of ways to row effectively, but I think that I saw most technical improvements in myself when I had like that direct visual reference. And World Rowing has like this cache of just like tons of racing. And so that's something that I felt like I would sit on our like family computer, just like watching all of these races back to back, whether this is the Olympics, the World Cups, the World Championships. That's where I kind of felt like I could noticeably make my most like technical improvements. Is there another part to that question that I missed?
No, and I want to dive a little bit deeper into it, because it sounds like
Sure.
like you were a real student of the sport. Like people say student of the sport, and that's probably like an easy thing for a lot of people to say, like be a student of the sport, this and that, be a student of whatever, right? Like
Right.
Like it sounds like you were a real, for lack of a better way to say it, like you're a real rowing nerd, right? Like you dove into the details of it, and that's awesome. Like that's and like you kind of in many ways, and I don't know if that's something that you find that that's just you, or you probably have some teammates and some peers who are probably pretty similar.
Right.
And there probably is that certain level of technical detail that you have to kind of understand in order to kind of take that next step. And I'm curious with you, and I want to dive into, okay, now leaving high school, we'll talk about that here in a second, but describe to me, like you said that you were doing some steady state and some stuff like that on your own. Like describe to me one of those sessions. Like, did you have like a time or a routine that you stuck to? Was it more, hey, I'm this is the workout? Like, was there like specifics to you in high school? Like, these are workouts that I'm going to do. It's like, I'm doing, 3 by 15 minutes 2 times a
Yep.
week at this that like what did that look like?
It kind of started, I'd say, like after I had gone to youth nationals in my sophomore year. I was a lightweight, and I was growing, so I was like, okay, I don't know if lightweight's going to be my thing, and they were going to lower the weight from like 158 or like 159 to 149 again, and I was always around 148 at that time, and I was like, like I want to try and make that next step up. So I started eating more food, which supplemented the ability to do the like extra meters. And so I guess my junior year it'd be 2 to 3 days a week. I would do my normal like afternoon practice from, call it like 4 to 6, and I'd get home, and then like 7 or like 6:45 to like 7. Um, I would do an erg of some capacity. So whether that's just like a flat, 20 minutes, just get it done, or, 2 by 15, kind of like you mentioned. And I was doing that 2 to 3 times per week. When I was noticing those like drastic improvements in terms of like my 2K scores. So like call it went from 640 or like 639 to like 632 over a winter season, my junior year. And then from 32, I went to like 28 over the spring season. Those were kind of those baby steps into like what I was always under the impression that, oh, in order to get faster for 2K, you have to put on more weight and you have to get stronger in the weight room. And then I started doing the cardio and it felt like, oh, wait a minute, I can just get way more gains just by holding a flat pace than learning how to sprint for 300 meters in the like closing parts of a 2K. So I'd say that kind of happened my junior year, and then like for my senior year, I wanted to obviously do the U19 national team, and so I always asked myself, all right, what are the Germans doing? Like that was my kind of like go-to motto, and you can ask like my mom that, because I would always be like, all right, mom, what are the Germans doing? And then I would do, incrementally more than I did my junior year. So, would do my normal practice and I would come home and I would do like 40 to 60 minutes of extra work. And again, it's finding that where I can push myself, but not get so tired that I'm a complete zombie during school and then during the actual practice. And that's where like I would just put my heart rate monitor on and just hold 150 beats per minute, watch a movie. And all of a sudden it became pretty fun to do steady state when you get to like have like the movie in the background that you're looking forward to watching. One series that I remember binge watching was Breaking Bad. My senior year spring, I would only watch Breaking Bad while I was doing steady state, and the plot is extremely addicting. So I'm like, I gotta get more steady state in. So all of a sudden, this extra work became like enjoyable, right? Um, and that's kind of how you trick yourself into it so that you can continue to like maintain those progress points.
You're onto something with that. Then everyone's just got to find a series that they're addicted and they're hooked on, and
Yeah,
they'll just
makes it
do more work
go
on their free time. Yeah.
so quickly. Yes, yeah,
Oh, that's awesome.
that's what I would
funny.
say.
Yeah, there you go. There's a secret right there. And then talking about your transition, right? So now going from high school to Drexel, right? And Drexel, right? So like all the respect in the world to that team and those athletes there, even though we're crosstown,
Rivals, yeah.
rivals to a degree, just when I was at St. Joe's, but going to Drexel and now, okay, like that transition, you highlighted it a little bit prior, but I want to hear a little bit more about like, okay, like I'm going to Drexel. This is my selection. I have this long-term vision of making an Olympic team down the line. And I think if you probably look at a lot of and again, Drexel is an amazing rowing team, and a top 20 team, if not top 15 perennially. But if you look at your teammates at the national team level, they're probably not made up of, kind of that B to, or maybe C, D final at the IRA type schools. And for you, I'm curious about, okay, like I have aspirations of going to an Olympic team someday. I'm going to go to, or, Drexel is going to be the place where I'm going to spend my next 4 years. Did you feel like you were like, was there any differences like in your time at Drexel, related to your peers now, right? Like, where it's like,
Yeah.
oh, like I probably have teammates who are at Washington and Cal and this and that. I'm
Yeah.
a small school athlete. Now I'm trying to compete with these, athletes and make an Olympic team. Talk about that experience. Like, it's a broad question, but talk about that experience
Yeah.
a little bit, in your transition out of college and then, to go to college and then out of college to go to, now I'm trying to go to a national team.
Yeah, I think the motto that I kind of had in my senior year, like, okay, what are the Germans doing, became a little bit broader, where I needed to ask myself, okay, what are the people sitting in the seats at the larger schools doing? And it's a pretty straightforward answer. It's more. I think at Drexel, had a great time, and I met a great group of guys, and like they were all really competitive, but we would do 16 or 12 to 16 kilometers of rowing in a morning session in eights. That, simply put, like, unless you are a genetic freak, is not going to cut it in terms of the workload that you need to do to kind of make the progress that you need to be where you want to be leaving college. Knowing that from day one, stroke one, you're going to have to put more time and effort into it is something that I kind of quickly came to the realization. I'm glad I did. Because like you said, the guys at Washington, they have a program from day one that is tried and true. The grunties are out there doing the same workload that our varsity 8 would do on their highest week of training. With that being said, I think what I liked about college was you had a little bit more liberty in your schedule. So I stacked my classes, or at least tried to, so I could have days off entirely. And then that's where I would do a triple session. I would do my Drexel mandated, and then I would do something else on top of that. And then probably go into the weight room and get like a circuit in or something like that. Because again, it's the bulk of the work doesn't happen over one practice. It's like these stacking, like, okay, if so-and-so at Cal got 4 more K today during the first session and 2 more K during the second session, all of a sudden they're up 6 kilometers on you. And that 6 kilometers over a day turns into 12 kilometers over 2 days, 24 over 4 days. And by the end of an entire month, they're up 180 kilometers on you, 180,000 meters. Like, to me, those little compounding, like understanding I need to do more within reason of not getting injured. Because I think that's another thing too, is it's pretty easy in college to kind of say, oh yeah, I'm young, I'll recover, and you end up losing a lot of quality time to develop the physiology because of back injuries or rib injuries. But knowing that you're coming from a small program, you're going to have to do something to the next level that other folks going for those seats aren't going to have to do, because it's going to be built into their programming. And I think having a productive dialogue with your coach, saying, hi, these are my ambitions, this is what I want to do, is a really good starting point. Because 9 times out of 10, they're not going to say, no, I don't want you to go for the national team, right? They would love that. But coming to an understanding that, potentially doing bursts, 200-meter bursts on January 25th is not going to really support you in that further goal. That's a really great time to be developing the physiology, the fitness. I think knowing that going into it, you can still make a very productive 4 years, even rowing at a level that's not, like you said, the grand final of the IRA. And it's very much like a commitment to yourself and to the craft that you have to come to. You're gonna have a very abnormal college experience. I'm gonna tell you that much. It's not gonna be this starry, oh, I did my practice and then I went to my summer internship, and then I got to the national team. You're gonna have to go above and beyond what the actual provided schedule is going to be. And then I kind of lead into my other point, is row over the summer. Whatever you got to do, you got to make sure that you're in a boat doing some racing over the summer, because I think that is quintessential for any oarsman's development, is racing in those like smaller stakes, I'm going to call them, championships around the United States, but as many times as possible and in as many boat classes as possible. So if you're a sweep rower, 4 years in high school, pick up pick up two oars, get sculling. If you are a sculler in high school and you go to sweep rowing, get into a pair. Like whatever you got to do to get as many racing experiences over your summers throughout college. Because a lot of the national team is these small boat trials that are very, very important. You have to be able to put yourself into those positions to prove that you can be in the seat. And what ends up happening is you row with a lot of different people. So you need to learn how to be adaptable. There's no one way to row correctly. And sometimes the best way is just to kind of mimic what someone else is doing. So having the ability to kind of go into those camps, whether you're doing a boathouse row camp like with Vesper or Penn AC, or going to Craftsbury up in Vermont, or like you're going down to Florida for something, like rowing with as many people as possible is something that I think is well undervalued, and you could definitely get a leg up on outside of eights. Sorry, as many people as possible outside of eights. That's the clarification. So that's kind of had the approach that I had to have throughout college, and I'm glad it paid off. But yeah, there's a lot of extra meters and miles that you have to do, and it's going to be you and the man in the mirror in those instances.
And for you, as you, and kind of diving into you personally, but also like I'm curious about one of the questions I love asking. I've had a couple athletes in your shoes, on so far over the last couple months, and I'm always curious about like what do their bad days look like in terms of just, obviously within the realm of training, right? Training and competing, and like how they handle themselves on their bad days. And I want to circle back around to something for you personally, right? Like you talked about it prior, like you just went, what you said, 5:46 for 2K couple weeks ago, right? Like you're not that massive of a human, like you're like walking down the street, like someone will be like, oh, like that's, he's,
just a guy. Yeah.
Yeah. Just a guy. Right. I don't see a Olympic rower, 2 times
right.
around, and to go and pull that kind of erg is incredibly impressive, but even more so talking about Drexel, right. Yep. And, your college experience, your high school experience, even before that, right? Unionville, then Drexel, which again, credit to them, but, still, C final kind of crew, right? Maybe eventually B final crew, but then your size and who you are as an individual, right? You don't have the physical makeup of, where you're 6'6", 220 pounds, and you broke 550 in almost college, right? In college, like it's been a process for you. And I'm curious for you, because we're going to circle back around to the bad days and the training and all that. But for you, is there like this underdog mentality? Is there like this feeling of, okay, like the deck might be stacked against me, which again, like at your level, everyone's working hard. They're all putting in insane amounts of work, and there's still, filtering that, or like, just all things being equal, like there's different things that separate the best from those who don't make the cut. But for you, I feel like that's even taken to a whole nother level, given some of these different storylines. Tell me a little bit about that mentality for you training and, to be in that position on your, to go to, or, to be competing for your second Olympics. Like describe a little bit about that mentality behind who you are as an athlete.
I fully subscribe to the saying, and I know Mike Tatey has said this. I don't know if it originally came from him, but I've heard him say it, and I can't think of a better way to kind of describe it. Rowing is 25% technical. So you need to be technically proficient. You have to get your blade in on time. You have to row with other people and all that stuff. It's 25% physiology. So, your engine, your VO2 max, your power output, like max watts and whatnot. The rest of it, the other 50% is mental. And if you can maximize your 50% of the mental, the other 25% is easy, right? You can push yourself to the limit, to the absolute physical limit, and get that 25% in the physical all the way up. You can like control yourself. You can think about it, be a student of the sport, mentally and kind of understand like it's like this mental grind to get your 25% technical maxed out. But I think where it does come down to the difference is knowing what motivates you and knowing how, like, even when it's not going well, knowing how to tell yourself to keep going forward, to keep taking those strokes, to keep going and on the early morning practices or the late night like erg sessions. And for everyone it's different. You know, a couple of things that work for me is music is extremely helpful. I find a lot of motivation in different types of music, whether that's rock or like EDM. I like to say I can biohack myself where I can time a beat drop and get an adrenaline kick during a 2K. Like, so I will always put like if I have aux for a 2K test, I can time a song that I know literally sends shivers down my spine when the beat drops at 800 to go. And so then all of a sudden I have 150 free meters where I don't feel any pain, which is pretty crazy, but just to show the power of music. I think also having the FU watch me mentality where, you know, getting recruited for colleges, there were a couple of coaches that were like, thanks, see ya. And that was it, you know, like at some of the big programs. And I'm very happy to, you know, kind of be like, you missed, because I saw the recruits that they pulled and they had great careers in the 4V and the 3V at their, you know, respective institutions. And I'm sure they were fantastic oarsmen in high school, but like having that FU watch me to kind of drive the development has always been something that I keep, you know, close to the chest, and keeps me going. And then also like something that keeps motivation is like building a group of friends that are supportive of you. You know, having a network of people that if it's a college night and, you know, Saturday night comes around and they're like, oh yeah, let's go to this party or whatever. And I'm not saying don't go to parties and enjoy the college experience, but like saying to your friend, hey man, like I didn't feel super great about practice this week. I'm just going to, you know, stay in and hit the meters on Sunday. Having a friend group, and I'm very blessed to be able to have that and like a supportive like group behind me, be like, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, man, see you. I think picking and choosing and like knowing like who could be in your corner for the long haul, like that's an extremely underrated part of it, because it is this grind of a sport where like you don't have the immediate success that you can just kind of show people. You know, like you need to have like someone that can and like groups of friends or significant others that can kind of understand the long haul, like the grind and the sacrifice. I think that's extremely underrated. And, you know, if you look at all the best athletes in this sport, they have a network behind them that support them through everything, through the ups and the downs and the injuries. And they never say, oh, well, you can just skip that session to come hang out with me. Like the best athletes have the people that are like, understood. Yeah. I'll see you when I see you, you know? So I think just those pieces of motivation for me is what I've felt like has been the most constant to see my improvement. And like, I will say improvement is not directly linear. There are ebbs and flows. But knowing that the bulk of the work that you put in kind of creates this new, like bottom, right? So like, you put in like 200K where, you know, you're feeling great and then you have a slight injury, but now all of a sudden your injury gets you down, but you're still at a higher point than when you started that 200,000 meter block. And then you go through the next training block and then, oh, you had a bad race result, but now all of a sudden you're still higher when you had that injury, right? So you're pushing like the resistance limit, you know, higher and higher, you know, throughout the training. And just understanding there is going to be setbacks, there's going to be injuries, there's going to be failures to PR, there's going to be someone that says you're not in the boat for this or that reason. But kind of trusting and backing yourself, having that mentality of FU watch me, I think all really, really solid ways to keep a healthy relationship and like openness to the long term in the sport. I've seen a lot of phenomenal athletes get kind of like backed off the hill, and they lose the mental battle. They have great ergs, they have great technique, but they take one or two many stumbles, and it seems like they just kind of fall. And then all of a sudden their ergs start suffering, or like they just can't row in the boat with someone else. And it's kind of crazy how the 50% mental really fills the other, 50% of the sport. So I think finding the motivation and what works for you is absolutely critical for the longevity of success.
I can't let us move on to the next question until, for our audience, because there's going to be a lot of people wondering, is there a genre at least that you can give us, or is there a particular song? You may not be willing to disclose the actual song, but a lot of people are going to be wondering what they put on at 800 meters from now moving forward.
Yeah. It's a remix, and part of the reason why, so I don't have a Spotify Premium. I use YouTube Premium. So one, I'm a YouTube fanatic, and two, YouTube Music. And this song is available on YouTube Music. I don't know if it's on Spotify because it's a remix. Let me just pull it up. I don't want to get the name wrong.
We'll have to put it in the show notes.
Yeah, it's the beat drop is absolutely nasty.
You're disclosing a lot of unconventional secrets to success right now. I'm loving it.
I wish I had someone kind of just lay out like things that so I didn't have to go through like 18 different like Reddit threads to find like one nugget of information, And again, like there are some things that work for me that don't work for others, and there are some things that like other people who are better than me do, and I just can't do it. Like it's like specific diets. I've always struggled with like, oh, I need to, be only clean diet. Like I go crazy if I don't have my like Oreos or, like ice cream or something like that. So it is Adderall by AYWY dot EMHREM and GWN Mike. So
I can
send it to you. So yeah, it's good. And if you can get some play like with a really, really strong bass, like it will shake your fundamental. It's a good song.
Oh man,
always gets me going.
These kids are learning some secrets, Breaking Bad,
some biohacking. Breaking Bad, yeah.
This is perfect. All right, so a couple more questions for you. I want to circle back around to, and you kind of highlighted it a little bit or talked a little bit about like the ebbs and flows of training. And again, like as we put ourselves in the shoes of, athletes at the high school and college level who are, again, just trying to take one or two things from your experiences. And again, like this is a question that I love asking people who, again, are competing at the highest of the highs and trying to, or go into the Olympics, having already been there. Obviously, no one's perfect. No one's, everyone's human.
Yep.
And I'm sure there's cycles in your training, and both from a session standpoint and then probably from a longer term cycle standpoint. You've probably had those times where, okay, maybe, I'm not 100% today. And whether it's on the erg or on the water, whatever it may be. And I'm curious if you have any kind of things that for you personally that whether it's, you do tangibly, right? Maybe you modify things or you tell yourself or this or that, like, how do you handle those bad stretches of training, both from a per session standpoint and then also from a, from maybe it is stringing along a couple of days or maybe even a week or two, throughout these cycles, at the Olympic level?
Yeah. I think knowing kind of what can wind you down, like an activity or a person that you like hang out with, or an exercise that you can do, because it's very easily to get wound up by an event or a test or anything in the sport. A bad result, bad race. And what I found in college, I would get wound up really, really easily. And to a fault, I probably was really mean not a great teammate in some instances, especially when the results weren't going super well. Especially the results that weren't going well that I thought we could do better. I, lashed out at teammates and kind of did some, I'd say, irresponsible actions. Like specifically, there was one race in college where we lost to St. Joe's, and I was confident that we could beat them, right? And I got so angry that I ran from West Philly, so like the Penn area, like Drexel's campus, all the way over to Manayunk. I just did it after the race. So it was, I don't know, like 13 miles. And I didn't bring any water, and my phone was about to die. So, like, I found myself in Manayunk, and thank God my brother lived in Manayunk at the time. And I showed up at his door, and I'm just like completely covered in sweat and whatnot. And I think like that is an instance where you get wound up, and that's not the smartest thing to do. But I, came down off of it. The energy, the anger kind of was released at that point. And I kind of had a pragmatic, all right, let's go back to the drawing board here. What went wrong in the race, instead of just being irrationally angry. And I'm still working on all of those kind of responses. Something that is good about getting motivation from anger can also be bad about it, in that, like, if you default to anger to kind of, be the reaction to bad circumstances, you can make it healthy in that, like, okay, I'm going to do more work, I'm going to get stronger, I'm going to blah blah blah, but also like it detracts you get, obviously there's the chemical, you create a lot of cortisol, but also like it detracts kind of like from the long-term goals, I'd say, in a short-term way. So like knowing like, okay, I need to take a deep breath, or working on different ways to, calm the mind. There's a lot of great like resources on the internet that can kind of like guide you to that, whether that's, counseling is a great way to do that. Working with a sports counselor, if your athletic department has one of those, I think is great too. Because you end up being able to talk through your emotions and then rationally approach them as you like get through that. And then, kind of going back to what I was saying before, is finding your network and learning like, these are the people that I can go and hang out with, and they don't care if, if you got third in the race that you should have won by open water. They don't care, in the short term that you didn't like smash the PR, right? Like hanging out with them and almost not thinking about the sport, I think is extremely valuable in those kind of like down moments. And there's a time and a place to kind of get back to the sport, but sometimes it is just good to just take a step back and just be relaxed and know like, yeah, there's something more than just rowing. And having those people that can kind of appropriately channel that is definitely a helpful way to kind of like get through the bad times.
No, that's incredibly valuable, and especially the part where you said talking to someone, right? Whether it's someone in your network or counseling or something like that. So,
yeah.
I'm not upset that you lost to St. Joe's, at that, I was probably, I'm sure I was on the coaching staff. I definitely was on the coaching staff.
Yeah, you're like, let's go.
Yeah. So, apologies, but, no, I think there's some really good, tangible stuff in there for athletes to be able to take away from those experiences. And also like, again, like people training at the highest level, like you're human, there's these things that, it's just, it's, you're no different than, in certain respects where you're going to just like the high school athlete who's, struggling to get through a winter training because they haven't PR'd in a month. Like, there's a lot of those similarities that exist. And I think it's a big thing. And a couple more questions. I got about 3 more questions. And
sure.
My first one is there something for you, again, coming back to like tangible stuff, right? You mentioned maybe diet is not, your number one, right? You love them Oreos, which I don't blame you. But is there like, whether it's sleep or recovery or, some semblance of nutrition, whatever it may be, right? Mindset, like stuff, routine, right? Is there something tangible that you feel like for you personally separates you from your peers, the other people, right? And obviously everyone's going to be good at all those different things to a certain extent. But is there something for you, like you make sure that you go to bed at this time and wake up at this time, or you
Yep.
make sure that you spend 10 to 15 minutes after practice foam rolling, right? Something tangible that you feel like is something that you you really take a lot of stock in. It's a real priority to you in your training.
Yeah, I think sleep is number one. Fortunately for me, I know from like I need between 7 hours and 30 minutes and 8 hours and 10 minutes is my golden, like is my just right zone. So knowing that, like I can hit that out of the park pretty much every single night, with if I know when I'm going to be waking up for training. So always getting that amount, and you do wake up some days and you feel like especially tired, but I know like any less than that and I'm really really down. So like just being able to nail the 7.5 hours to 8 hours and 10 minutes, like without a doubt, that's my first step of getting a leg up. And then I think secondly is, I know kind of my warm up routine that I need to do in terms of like mobility movements, that I feel the most prepared as soon as I hop in a boat. So that starts with like the tissue massaging foam rolling. So I like to do it for my warm up. I feel like I do my hamstrings, I get like my hips, the low back specifically. I've had some low back issues in terms of like bulging discs, and what I've found is that if I try and mobilize the area um, prior to getting into a boat, I end up being able to activate the core more to support the low back throughout like the strokes. So, I'll lie on the foam roller and kind of like let my spine like curl on top of the foam roller, like kind of like that. And then conversely, I'll kind of like do the cat cow to really like create some like mobility movements, and then I'll do that before every like, whether it's a steady state or an intense session. Um, I try and do a lot of stuff that opens up the hips as well, because I think for me, I'm 6'4", which I'm not like the shortest, but my arms aren't that long. So for me, length in the stroke really comes from a hip hinge and like the ability to get really compressed. So if I am stiff and I'm hopping on the water and I'm warming up stiff, I'm going to row stiff. So really getting into like a compressed position and in and out of it and trying to like get all the muscles like, moving in that. I don't think you need to static stretch before exercising. I don't know if the literature really supports doing that, but I do support mobility and just getting limber and getting the joints so that they're rotating in the correct way, and so that you can really activate the muscles as they are needed. So, like I said, I'll do that iteration of warm up before every session, without a doubt. Sometimes like if I don't have enough time, I won't be able to do all of them, but I will at least do the foam roll and kind of like get my hips moving and like crack my back. Um, in terms of other tangibles, I'd say I try and like a metric for me is I try to eat 190 grams or more, like between 190 and 210 grams of protein every single day, rest days included. For me, I think that's been pretty critical in developing lean muscle mass throughout the training, and then also reducing the muscle catabolism that can happen during the heavy training. So, 190 grams of protein, and kind of like outside of that, whatever fits, when I'm hungry and whatnot. Um, Pretty easy ways to do that is egg whites is what I found. Like it's the lowest impact on my digestion relative to the amount of protein that can go in. So some tangibles with that. Then like I know pretty well what my caffeine tolerance is, and I prefer to get my caffeine through black coffee, and I will add in additives like oat milk and honey to try and like, increase the carbs. But like, I know 3 cups of coffee for me gets me in a really good spot, and I can do like up to an entire pot to really get me, going. So trial and error over many years, I think I have my caffeine intake pretty dialed at this point.
That's awesome. And that's, I think again, like there's nuggets in there that athletes can take with them, right? Whether it's increasing protein intake or, just again, sleep, I think is a massive one, that we can
Absolutely.
all, probably spend a little bit more time prioritizing. My last question for you, and actually two more questions, right? And then we'll let you get on.
Sure.
You got a busy couple weeks coming up, so we'll let you get on
I,
to it.
I'm,
But
I'm, yeah, I'm gonna have a nice dinner, and we got selection coming up, so I'm just
yeah,
gonna kind of relax and keep my mind in a good spot. So
yeah,
I'm good. We're
there you
hanging
go.
out.
Yeah, and for you, is two questions, right? So one is there a piece of like just any last advice for again those athletes who are going through, they're high school athletes, maybe they come from a smaller or less known program, and again whether it's training advice or recruiting process stuff, right? Stuff that helped you. And again, it comes back to like something that's tangible and grasp, right? Something or even just mentality and things like that. But any last bits of advice for the athlete, right? The Justin Best of however many years ago in high school that you would tell yourself that other athletes can maybe learn from, both either from a training perspective, from a recruiting perspective, from a mindset to kind of get to that next level. Anything that
Yep.
you would, care to share to those athletes or tell those athletes?
I'd say don't underestimate the power of writing a goal down, and then also the subset of goals that could help you achieve them. When I was a kid, was like, oh, what is that? What difference does it make if it's like written down? All of a sudden, when you see the words on a piece of paper or typed into a notes app, um, they have a little bit more weight to them. And then also, you have that reminder to remind you when you're not thinking of it, right? So I wrote down goals of mine and put them in my room. I still do that to some effect. So my background in my phone, right? You have the Paris Olympic logo, and then I have the countdown of the days. So like I still employ that, and I didn't put much merit to it, but then I really kind of found how critical it was when I started doing it more consistently. And not just the big goals that scare you, but like the 4 or 5 goals in between that point that you need to get to. I think having those written down in a place that you interact with on a daily or a weekly basis is something that um, can be like one tangible, but also like keeps you on the right path. Um, so for me, again, it's the Paris Olympics, but it could be getting a 1540 on the SAT. And then like taking an SAT practice test every single weekend. Or it could be, I want to get recruited by Harvard, Yale, or Princeton. I need to get to a 612. I need to do X amount of meters. Like having that stuff written down day in and day out, it eventually does lead to the action items that get you to those goals. So just something that I wish I'd put a little bit more weight into when I was in high school, but is something that I think is tangible and actually is really great to facilitate that mental component of it.
That's perfect. That's awesome. And that's a great way to kind of cap off, this discussion. And my last question for you is, and before we kind of close things out, but what's everything goes right over this next, I guess what, 6 months?
Yeah.
It may be a little bit early for you to kind of start to talk about that, but what's next for you? Is it like, hey, I want to go for a third? Is it I want to transition to right? I know you're working now. Like,
Yep.
what's if
So
you fast forward to September or
yeah.
whatever,
I,
like
I
what's that
have an
look
answer.
like?
I have an answer. Yeah, I've thought about it. Don't worry. So in terms of immediately following Paris, I decided that I'm going to take at least one full year off of international competition. So I won't be traveling abroad to compete for Team USA in the immediate 365 days from Paris. Um, I will then, at the end of that period, make a decision of whether or not I'm going to continue for the national team for LA. Um, at that point, because my worst fear is that I make a decision hastily and or I make the decision that I want to come back, but I don't give the respect that's needed to the actual training involved, because like this is not a sport where you can just be like, I'm half in, half out. I'll show up on trials. I'll be good enough at trials. And because the level of competition just keeps getting slightly faster and faster. And like, you really need to be like 100% of your endeavor going to it. And you can kind of look at the results of the most recent trials as a proof point for that. I would say, like, at the end of that, 365 days, I'll make it a determination of LA 2028. But in the interim, I'll be working like kind of full time with the bank that I currently work with. So excited to kind of, see what it's like to be the corporate only, and get a little taste of life where I'm not traveling for 6 months of the year. So that's kind of something that I'm like looking forward to, but we'll be making that determination at that time.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's I guess a part of you probably wants to fulfill what you wrote down in that yearbook.
Exactly. Yeah, I got to have a conversation with myself. Got to figure out what I want.
Yeah. No, Justin, this was awesome. This was I'm sure there's a lot of just, again, gold in there for athletes to be able to take, bite-sized information that a lot of these kids can take, and coaches, and athletes within any realm, right? Like, there's a lot of really good stuff in here. Any last things that, anything that, any last words or anything that we can do for you before we close things out?
Yeah, just keep rooting for Team USA, and show your support on like the if US Rowing makes a post for someone, like, definitely hit it with the likes, and hopefully we can get the rowing community to back the US at the Paris Olympics to get the screen time, and hopefully have more eyes on the sport. I think that's only a good thing, especially given the Boys in the Boat kind of publicity that came out recently. More eyes, more content is always a good thing. So something that would be good. Like and share if this is chopped up and whatnot, so more people can see it.
No, Justin, I really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun. Great conversation. Maybe we'll do a part 2 down the line.
Yeah. Kind of a recap. See how things play out. Yeah.
Chat even more. But again, I really appreciate it. There's a lot of value in here. And again, good luck as you continue this journey. And thanks for coming on. We really appreciate it.